Now, you're used to seeing me talk about valuable antiques, historical originals, and also high quality replicas on this channel, but today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to destroy a sword. Hi folks, Matt here, Schola Gladiatoria. So to be more specific, the Cloudhammer S5 longsword from RVA Katana. I'm going to stick a link below down to them, but you will have hopefully seen my previous video where I really put this through some brutal testing and it stood up to that pretty well. You can check out that review. I'll stick the link also down below to that if you want to see that. Now, they came back to me, so John from RVA Katana, and thanks again for sending me this and some other swords which you're going to see on the channel soon as well. And Cloudhammer came back and went, "This is great, Matt, but can you destroy it?" So I was going to take this to a swordsmith friend of mine and have them fix it up. But instead we're going to go the other direction. Instead we are going to destroy this sword. So I'm going to put it through its paces without much more talking. Just very briefly about the specs of this sword. This is so-called S5 shock steel. That means the steel and the heat treatment has been specifically chosen to make it tough, but not necessarily hard on the edge. So one of the things that came up was edge damage against in fact, a training saber. So it does have chips in the blade, which will act as stress risers, and the blade is bent from hitting bits of tree and large bits of wood. And the guard is loose, the grip is a little bit loose. So this sword is already on the way out, it's already been brutalized, but it is still a usable sword. You could still cut with it, you could still fight with it, but this time we're actually going to destroy it. But of course, safety first, so let's get some safety gear on. So here we are folks, back at my favourite testing ground, the end of my garden incidentally, and we've got two things that we're going to attempt to break this sword on. First of all, I have a rock. That's right, I've pulled a rock out of my rockery. I believe it's sandstone, something like that, maybe limestone, I'm not sure. And this is a old Reginier sabre. Now previously you saw me bang the edge of this longsword against the Reginier sabre, but I considered, look, if I'm going to destroy this sword, I can maybe try to illustrate a point. You'll notice that is a much narrower blade than that, and that does affect this test. But something I've noticed over the years is when people are sparring, fencing, they often, with blunt swords, smash the tip of their sword or the end of their sword, the hitting part of the sword, into the opponent's parry. So they're swinging their sword and they see the opponents put their parry in and they smash the blade into it anyway. This is a really, really bad habit to do with sharp blades. It's going to destroy your edge and might destroy the entire blade. So we're going to see what does actually happen when I repeatedly strike the base of this Reginier practice sabre with a blunt edge against the sharp upper part of this broader and heavier longsword. We'll see. But first of all, let's smash this into some rock and see what happens. Maybe it won't even survive that. So here is the rock of doom, or maybe it won't be. Let's see, maybe the rock will come off worse than the sword. So far the sword's doing pretty damn well, I have to say, and the rock not so much. You can see, oh, maybe this is the perfect mason's tool. I don't think so, it's not very precise, but massive great chunk out of the rock. Let's keep going at it. Those who are interested, this is the edge that I've been striking against the rock. Minimal damage. The pommel's still solid, the guard's still very loose. So, I didn't expect this. The pommel's broken off, like completely snapped off. Amazingly, wow, amazingly, the blade has taken remarkably little damage. You can see basically it's worn away here. You can see that I've been cutting with the centre of percussion because you can see all the dust from the stone on it. But you can see a great big, well, rather a small chip missing out of the edge, but really done remarkably well. But the pommel, not so much. And I can't even see the tang. Whoa, that's weird. We'll have a look at that in a second. Let's have a quick look at the rock. Oh. As you can see, that has taken quite a beating. Let's have a go against the steel saber blade and see what happens to the blade against that before the pommel completely comes off. So just before I go into hitting the steel saber, which is just behind me, something I've noticed which I didn't initially notice, the blade, not only is it now bent that way, but it's also bent this way. It's like bananaed in the plane of the edge. Hopefully you can see that on camera. The point is no longer in line with the hilt. So literally I was hitting, regardless of how hard it looks on screen, you can see what it's done to the stone. I was hitting that hard enough that it's actually bent the blade in this way. Now, funnily enough, this is something I have actually seen with practice swords, particularly with rapiers, where people give very heavy cuts with very narrow bladed rapiers. And I've also seen it with side swords. They banana in this direction. Yet another indication that you're smashing your blade too hard into the opponent's parry or buckler in some cases. In fact, just the other week, I saw a blade break on the edge of someone's buckler. You shouldn't be hitting other people's parries or bucklers that hard. If you see they're blocking, redirect the sword to another place. Okay, that is an absolute, I won't say a pro tip, but it is really important. And so many, even quite experienced HEMA people are smashing blunt swords into each other in a way that sharp swords would not survive. Right, so once again, the pommel is almost completely, it's still actually completely firmly attached, but the stalk, a thread I imagine, that goes into that pommel has completely bent and smashed through the wood. Hopefully you can see that there. And weirdly, I can't see the tang inside there. Anyway, we're going to hit this blade and see what happens. So just so that you're clear, in case anybody's confused at this point, this is the base of the blade here. There's the saber. It's hanging in that crook, and I'm going to slam my sharp edge into the base of the blunt edge here. So this is as if you were cutting with a sharp sword and the opponent was parrying with the base of their blade. Just going to stop to show you the notch that's put in that blade there. Really pretty deep, about 5 millimeters deep. Let's go again. I'm getting a strong burning smell. You can see, same. In fact, the second was even slightly deeper, I would say. 2 really big notches. They should act as stress risers. I also want to point out there's no visible damage to the Reginier practice saber. Hilariously, I've just made one of the notches even deeper, so I've gone in exactly the same spot. So I actually broke the branch off my stand that this was hanging from. You can hopefully see there is absolutely no damage whatsoever to the practice saber. The same cannot be said for the sharp edge. Look at that. Look how deep those have bitten the blade. Now, Again, I'll just remind you, if you're practicing HEMA, fencing, if you're smashing the cutting part of your edge into the parrying part of the opponent's edge or buckler or armour, that's what's going to happen to your edge. It's still a functional weapon, it hasn't broken yet, but it's massively increased the chances of this breaking. Should we go back to the rock? So here we are back at the rock station, and I'm going to focus the strikes on that area where we've now got these massive notches in the blade from hitting the other blade. And there we go, exactly as I predicted. The strike on the other side of the blade, stress riser right in that notch, shattered across the blade. There is the broken end of the blade. So, although making the edge softer means overall you've got a less brittle blade, largely speaking, the fact that you've got notches in the blade because the blade is softer and because those notches are bigger, the bigger notches act as a stress riser and the blade breaks anyway. So as regards to the Cloudhammer S5 longsword, thank you to RVA Katana and John there for sending this. It wasn't that difficult to break when I followed the formula that I knew would work. Okay, so first of all you get notches in the blade, then you focus a strike on where the notches are. They act as a stress riser and it breaks. But full testament and kudos to the blade, at least, I'll come to the pommel in a second, to the blade, what it did to that rock. Let's look at this. Oh, that is a serious amount of abuse. So the blade, before I put notches in it, actually did really well. For me, a bigger concern, I actually think the blade stood up pretty well, it's a bit on the soft side. It's not great for an edged cutting sword and it's more likely to get notches in it quicker, which acts as a stress riser. But the most worrying thing is that that pommel came off in the way that it did. It's still attached. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to break the pommel off so you can see how that's attached and see how it's built and why that happened. Hooray! So first up, this is a first for the channel. In this 10 plus years that I've been doing the channel, I deliberately broke a sword on the channel. Now I just want to say, don't get used to it. Check out Matthew Jensen's channel if you want to see lots of breaking swords, but it's just not really my thing. But I was asked to specifically by Cloudhammer. So first of all, kudos to RVA Katana, John there, for sending this to me, and to Cloudhammer saying, hey, go and break it. Okay, so full credit to them for doing that. They wanted to see what this would stand up to. As mentioned, I followed a formula. I put notches in one edge, I hit the other edge, smack, it broke. But let's not forget, it stood up to an enormous amount of abuse before that. I did a whole nother video chopping wood with it and bending it and standing on it and doing all sorts of other stuff. And it did survive that, and it was still, or at least appeared to be still, a fight-worthy sword at that point. So yes, it broke, and we expected it to break. We set out to break it. However, in doing the test, two more concerning things were revealed, and you only know about one of those so far. So you know that the pommel, or rather the tang just below the pommel, bent. Unfortunately, that's the reason. It only had a stalk, a little rat tail tang there between. Now it's not threaded, it is peened all the way through, but just because something's peened does not mean it's strong. I have never personally seen a historical medieval sword constructed like this. That is way too thin. It's crazy. There's a huge amount of leverage at this end of the tang. There is at this end of the tang. We'll look at that in a second. And so it's always going to bend or break there. That is terrible. They should not be built like that. But once I had smashed off this pommel and got the handle off and the handle had disintegrated, just grab the handle, the wood had completely disintegrated at the lower end because it only had that stalk tang exerting a lot of force. At the top end, however, remained pretty good, okay? But overall, I would say the wood is too soft. It should be harder wood, and it shouldn't have this stalk at the end there. That's ridiculous. But it did reveal yet another problem. So when I got the guard off, the guard's actually, you know, quite nicely made. It seems to be cast stainless steel from the look of it, with a plate, perhaps a reinforced steel put in there. But anyway, the guard's okay. But when I got this off, I had noticed during the first testing that there was a slight bend in the tang. Now, it didn't actually get worse. However, let's see if I can get this on camera. You will notice a crack. A great big crack in the tang there. So that would have failed. So at some point, whatever else I had done to this sword, even if it had a really strong tang up here, even if I hadn't deliberately set out to break it down here, it already had a fatal crack in the tang right there. Personally, I've made videos in the past about saying how I don't think tangs should be hardened. I think they should be annealed or not hardened in the first place. You're better having a tang that bends. As we saw, it was actually quite difficult, even with that thin stalk. It was quite difficult to get this pommel off, even though it bent. It's better to have a tang that bends than cracks. And this is very definitely fatally cracked. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there without blathering on too much. Don't be too harsh on Cloudhammer or RVA or anything else for this, because I did set out to break this and they told me to break it, so full kudos to them for that. However, there are definitely some issues with that model of sword and I can't endorse it at all. The tang's not constructed right. I don't particularly like the crossguard or the pommel. The grip could be made better. And the steel, in my opinion, is a little bit on the soft side, although, as we saw, it is very, very tough. But I want to give one parting sort of like tip of the hat, and that is to the trusty old Regnier sabre, which has basically no visible damage. It actually has some steel on the edge from the other sword. It is literally stolen steel from the Cloudhammer sword. So cute, and this is a very old, this is an Easton Mark II sabre. This is the sword I did with Regnier Armory. So kudos to the heat treatment and the steel at Regnier Armory. Yes, this is a blunt blade and the other one was a sharp one. It's not an even comparison, but nevertheless, this stood up incredibly well and is a very old sparring sabre. So there we go. I hope this has been interesting, amusing, entertaining, everything else that you wished and hoped for it. Please give me a like. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you're not already. Recommendations, questions, always welcome down below, and also feedback to Cloudhammer or indeed RVA Katana. I will be featuring other products from RVA Katana that I won't be destroying on this channel really soon. So I hope I'll see you all really soon. Take care of yourselves. Remember, stay safe, wear safety equipment like mail shirts and chainsaw helmets, and I'll see you back really soon. Cheers, folks. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.